Good morning and welcome to another episode of Capital Preview. I'm Bill Peard. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Iowa Cable and Telecommunications Association. This show is sponsored by Mediacom, where we try and bring our senators and House members in to discuss with us what's going on up at Capitol Hill. Our guest today is Representative Chris Hagenow, District 19, that covers Polk and Dallas County. Good morning,
Good morning,
Chris.
Bill.
How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me here.
No, I appreciate you coming in. So I'm just going to jump into it because we got a lot of stuff to talk about this morning. How's the session going so far? I know we're only into week 3, but
because we're only in week 3, things are still going great. The beginning of session is a little bit like the beginning of a school year.
Right.
Everybody's excited to be there. Excuse me. But
do you want some water to?
But we've heard speeches and all the pleasantries, and we're getting down to business now, so it's good.
Good. I'm going to let you recover just a sec here. The governor has proposed several changes in her tax policy, including an increase in the state sales tax. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it's an ambitious proposal, and we'll get through this here eventually. But no, it's the foundation of this is the Natural Resources Trust Fund, which is or however you want to characterize that, which was a constitutional amendment that the next time the state sales tax was increased, 3/8 of a cent would go towards natural resources, water quality, and related efforts. And so she has a plan to trigger that by increasing the state sales tax by a full penny. And then the other 5/8 of a cent would go toward mental health funding, some tax relief, accelerating income tax triggers, and so there's a little bit in there for everyone. And I'm excited to work on it because I think there's a lot of good we can do with that. And one of my goals throughout that is to try and actually reduce Iowans' tax burden overall. Mm-hmm. So while you talk in terms of we talk in terms of increasing the state sales tax, in the end, the goal is to actually reduce our tax burden and yet still fund priority needs.
So obviously that's part of the budget process. Right. So kind of where are we with the budget process?
Well, the governor, that also starts with the governor. She submits her proposed budget, and we begin the process of going through each of the different budget areas and looking at that, and that becomes the foundation for that process. And so our budget subcommittees have started working and started looking through each of those priorities, and they'll be tweaked a little bit along the way. Some of those things that maybe the legislature doesn't see as quite the same priority as the governor, and vice versa. But that process has begun, and those committees are beginning to meet. Another important part of that, which is the first thing we do within our appropriations each year, is public K-12 education funding. Mm. And the governor has proposed $103 million of new funding. That has to be set within the first 30 days of session by law, and so we're set out to do that, and that's the goal, and I'm confident that we will get that done. You hear a lot of, I think, political back and forth about K-12 education funding, but the fact is, since 2011, since Republicans came into the majority in the Iowa House, we have invested over $850 million in new money into K-12 education in this state.
It's impressive.
Yeah, the number of teachers has increased dramatically, and that has far outpaced the rate of inflation in this state. And so we have made considerable investments into public education, and we'll continue to do it.
Mm-hmm. The next thing I kind of wanted to talk to you about is the governor has again proposed amending the Constitution to restore felons' voting rights. What's the status of that bill?
We passed that out of the Iowa House last year, and the governor's again made it a priority this year. So that resolution sits in the Senate, and I think they're interested in working on that. There's different pieces that go along with that to make sure that it's done fairly and correctly, and there's also some concerns that are we maybe doing too many constitutional amendments this year. We've got one on to add Second Amendment language to the state constitution, which is currently missing. There's another proposal to amend the gubernatorial line of succession. So how many of those do we want on the ballot in 2022? But it remains a priority for the House to get that felon voting rights piece done.
I'd like to, if you can speak a little bit to what that constitutional succession is from the governor's, because I know with Governor Reynolds' issue, we ran into that.
Yeah.
So can
well,
you
the one piece
go through
that
that
is,
a little bit?
Yeah, it was a little bit. There was some, I guess, gray area about what happens to the lieutenant governor becoming governor, and then her authority to appoint a new lieutenant governor, which is the process that would happen at the federal level.
Right.
The state constitution isn't quite as clear on that process. The other thing that's different between Iowa and the federal level, and I don't suspect that anyone's really trying to change it, is at the federal level, the next in line after the vice president would be the Speaker of the House. In Iowa, the next in line is the President of the Senate. Okay. So, and again, I have not heard anyone propose that, but there are some differences between those two systems.
I know that was a big deal, so it's kind of interesting to hear.
Right.
Redistricting, I know I'm kind of jumping all over here, but we've got a lot of kind of important things going on. I know redistricting is coming up, which is going to change boundaries of House seats and Senate seats. And
it is. We do that every 10 years after the census. We do that across the country every 10 years. In many states, that has become a very, very political process and has actually increased the attention that's paid on winning state legislative chambers around the country to try and game that a little bit. In Iowa, we have a model process where there is a commission, or the Legislative Services Agency draws the maps, submits to the legislature, and vote them up or down. And then there's a process for if they get voted down, and you go through multiple versions of those maps. And so the conversation about what's going to happen to my district or anybody else's district, legislators are self-interested in that, obviously, has already begun. And going back, I was in the legislature 10 years ago when we did that last time, and you end up with primaries that wouldn't have happened before, or two incumbents against each other, or people that decide, well, this is a really good time for me to step down and retire. So it's a fascinating process, but I think it's one that Iowa does very well, and I think it's very fair.
What are some of your own personal legislative priorities for this session?
I have a couple. I mean, beyond obviously I care a lot about balancing the budget, but I'd like to really work on tax reform, and we touched on that a little bit earlier, but I'd like to continue to work on property tax reform. I think that if you go out and talk to your average Iowan out in the street, a recurring theme that you'll hear is, what can you do to help my property taxes? And so anything we can do to limit that, and I think that's tied also for this year on mental health funding, because that's largely paid for out of property tax dollars. I also care passionately about school choice issues and hoping to increase the school tuition organization tax credit, which is a piece that helps lower income Iowa students attend the private school of their choice. It's been tremendously successful, and I'd like to see what we can do to increase that over the coming year.
We're knee deep right now into the campaign and elections. We hear a lot about the upcoming elections for the president and other federal offices. What can you tell us about the state races that are going to be held this fall as well?
Well, there are always a lot of twists and turns on that path, but one that's going to be a little different this time is what is actually in play. The governor's not on the ballot. The Senate has a very wide margin, and most prognosticators don't think that chamber is in play, that Republicans will continue to hold the Senate. However, in the Iowa House, it's a 53-47 majority, and so it's very close. And so the action, I think, on who controls what is going to be in the Iowa House this year. So on one hand, you have Democrat leaders arguing that we're only 4 seats away from the majority, which is true. And there were some very close races in 2018. On the other hand, there are 9 seats that the Democrats hold in the Iowa House that Governor Reynolds won 2 years ago. And so there's a pretty wide playing field of where those seats will be in play. And it's fascinating. It's not 1 or 2 races here and there, but all 100 seats in the Iowa House will be on the ballot.
Absolutely. So the other thing I want to talk to you about too is because it's so prevalent right now. I mean, we're 1 week away from caucusing. It's uniquely Iowa, the caucus process, and all eyes turn to Iowa have been for the last year, but certainly now it's at red hot.
Right.
level with the caucus. So do you want to kind of share a little bit of your personal
I
views
think-
on the caucus?
Yeah, I do. I'm an apologist for the caucus. I think it's great. I think there are criticisms around the country that Iowa gets to go first. We don't look like the rest of the country. But one thing I know about Iowans, they take the process very seriously on both sides of the aisle. They go out and they go to the events and they meet candidates. And I think that anyone that wants to be president ought to have to come and do retail politics in front of educated voters, which is what happens in Iowa. Iowans know what questions to ask, and they got to face the music. They got to answer the questions. It's not just about running large TV ads in major media markets. You come to Iowa and meet people and do it.
Right.
But Iowans take it seriously, and so I think all Iowans should advocate for us maintaining first in the nation status. It's a great thing. For our economy, it's a great thing for us. There's a lot of Iowans that ascend to doing important jobs at the federal level because of that. And the other thing, I think all Iowans should engage in the process if they have any interest. I sometimes think that there is no voter in the country that has a bigger share in electing the leader of the free world than an Iowan. You get to participate in the caucuses. Iowa's a swing state in the election, and I think we take for granted the amount of attention that we get as voters here. But what voter on the face of planet Earth has a bigger share in an important decision than an Iowan?
I think that's so cool. I mean, I know you said that you addressed a group of sixth graders last week, and you shared that with them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a cool thing because, you know, I grew up in Nebraska, and we were definitely flyovers.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, because we never saw any, not even close to the amount of candidates that we see in Iowa. I know I joke with my friends that I can be shopping in a Hy-Vee and see the Vice President of the United States in one of the aisles. You know, and it's just. It's uniquely Iowa.
Yeah.
It's so cool. So.
I saw a picture on Facebook of a friend of mine that local city elected official that was with his kids at a coffee shop, and looking out the back window behind his kids was Bernie Sanders out on the sidewalk. So it's just wherever you might happen to be. Yeah. But it's a lot of fun, and I really encourage everyone to do it.
So I think that Iowa has its challenges, but I think our challenges are easily solvable, and in my opinion, we're a state that should be proud of what our status is, and like you said, we affect who would be the president of the United States. Iowans do.
Yeah. Most recently, Barack Obama wouldn't have become president of the United States without the Iowa caucuses, so it's important.
Well, I appreciate. Do you have anything else before we wrap up? I mean, anything else you want to share with our viewers?
No,
It's been a great conversation.
Well, I trust you. You know how to lead a good conversation, Bill. I always like talking to you. Yeah. But just like engaging in the caucus process, please don't ever be shy about engaging in the state level process. The Iowa legislature is tremendously accessible. Come up, visit, call, write, and legislators take that seriously. It's the biggest part of our job. So
I mean, you truly are for a person that spends a lot of time down there.
Yeah.
I've seen members of the public just walk up and talk to you guys right outside the house or in the cafeteria or wherever. So.
I enjoy that part of the process, and I encourage people to do it.
So we have a lot to be proud of as Iowa.
Right.
So
that's right.
Well, Representative Hagenow, I appreciate you taking your busy time,
Absolutely,
busy schedule to come with us or come talk to us this morning. So please, our guest this morning has been Chris Hagenow, District 19 for Polk and Dallas County. I appreciate your tuning in to Capitol Preview, and stay tuned for more episodes of Capitol Preview. Thank you.